Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of All Bodies, All Foods. As we are approaching I can't believe I'm saying this, the Renfrew Foundation 34th annual conference,
Wow.
34 years, we wanted to devote an episode to reflect on our experiences, what we've learned, how we've grown, who we've met along the way. Some incredible speakers
Mhm.
have been at the conference, and it's worth an entire episode, I think, talking about all of the different experiences we've had. So we invited Dr. Melanie Smith here today to talk more about it. Welcome to the show, Melanie.
Thank you. I'm here to be your resident conference junkie.
Yeah.
I love, I love conferences in general. So it's something I get excited to talk about. So thank you.
Yes. If my memory serves me, I think that I've heard you say it's the most wonderful time of the year.
It is. Well,
Did I hear that
again,
right? I
yeah,
overheard you saying that to
you did
someone.
hear that right. And again, this is just truly revealing anyone who knows me well enough knows that I have a very strong inner, I say inner nerd, and I mean that with great affection
Section.
towards the
Yeah.
nerds of the world, because I consider myself a card carrying member, but like I love professional education, continuing
Yeah.
education events, and I love it and I love getting to see my people, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think conferences in general are a unique opportunity that I don't get in my day-to-day life to connect with people that I otherwise wouldn't get to see
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
face to face. And I mean face to face, like on a screen sometimes, and I mean face to face in person sometimes, but that it just creates these opportunities that you don't have. So I've always said, like, I could set my watch by it, the knowing when the conference happens every year, but and particularly the Renfrew conference, as I've attended it many, many times. Which I realize, again, I'm not really setting my watch, but I'm like setting my calendar to it. Like it's like
Yeah.
my um, beacon every year, and everything kind of gets planned around that.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
It's like the new year for an eating
yeah,
disorder therapist, It's like Happy New Year, Renfrew
yeah,
Conference.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
speaking of, you've been to many, many, but how many conferences have you been to so far? And what's your
I think
involvement been?
okay, so I don't I might not have the number exactly correct because it gets a little fuzzy the longer I go back, but I've worked for Renfrew for 17, I'm pushing 17 years. I have
Yeah.
not attended all of those conferences because in my earlier years, it was not something that I was able to do, but I remember the first year that I was able to go to the conference, and I felt very special and important, but also had a lot of imposter syndrome because I'm like, actually, I don't know if I can like sit at the big kids table and like be with all
Mhm.
of these, because I knew I was going to be in a place in a space with all of these like big names, right? These people that
Mhm.
I've read their articles in journals, or I've
Yeah.
watched them on webinars, or I've been to their trainings in larger forums or something. And then I get to like be in the same room with them or be in these, networking events with them online and have more direct interaction. And that it just gets all my my senses, excited
Yeah, it
and
gets the
tingling.
butterflies
So
going, you know?
I think of the 17-ish years, I think I've been to 10. I think this will
Oh,
be
wow.
my 10th
Yeah.
conference that I've
Mm.
participated in as an attendee.
Mhm.
Um, and then I've been part of the planning, the program committee, which is the group of folks that come together to put together the kind of clinical program to determine like what is the theme, what message are we truly trying to shape and create, what sort of learning opportunities do folks want to have, what is kind of the buzz in the field, what are people wanting to know more about, what are some of the controversies or difficult things that are happening with the field, and how do we talk about that and navigate that. And I've been a part of that. This will be my 9th conference that I've been a part of that. So it's pretty cool that I've
Wow.
gotten to like be behind the curtain a little bit more, to
Yeah.
understand what it takes to kind of bring it all together. So that only made my enthusiasm grow quite a bit more.
Yeah. Well, and also, Melanie, let's not forget, you've been a speaker. at the Renfrew
a few
Conference,
times.
a moderator.
Mhm.
Can you say a little bit about what that's like?
Yeah. Well, again, it was a big, the first time I got um, to speak, again, I was very excited and honored because again, I felt like I got invited to sit with the big kids, but again, also terrified, right? And
Yeah.
nervous that, here I am in this bigger platform than maybe what I was used to in my earlier days. And just wanting to do a really good job and wanting to, again, learn from other people, but also really taking very seriously that like people come here to get something new or to
Yeah.
really, garner some skills, right? Learn something that's really actually tangible and useful for their practice. So taking that very seriously, which of course increased my anxiety a little bit, right?
Yeah.
About being able to deliver and to perform. Um, but yeah, it's fun being on that side too. A little more nerve-wracking, certainly, because you're on the thing. But
Yeah.
it's been I really appreciate the opportunities to be able to do it because it's obviously a big growth opportunity. And but my biggest like exciting moments though have been when I've been able to like moderate or facilitate like keynotes with some of our like more notable, presenters that again, the the fangirling opportunities are pretty big. Therefore, the opportunities for me to say things that are embarrassing or put my foot in my mouth are also big.
Right. Like the fear of going viral for saying something
For
Right.
saying
that
something or
doesn't land
mispronouncing
quite right.
someone's name, like
Oh,
that's always,
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
always have like angst about that ahead of time. But again, like when I sit back and think about it, like how cool was it that I got to
Mm-hmm.
talk to, last year I got to sit down on a stage and simultaneously talk to Chrissy King and Reagan Chastain and Whitney Waythor all at the same time. Like,
Yeah.
did I really get to do that? Like, I
Yeah.
still actually am not sure. Like, there's pictures, there's video evidence, but like, in my heart of hearts, did I ever think like, and someone who follows each of them on social media and has for a long time and had this like parasocial relationship. Oh, and then I got to like have lunch with them and sit down with them and host, and have like I thought a really interesting, good conversation. Like, what an amazing opportunity that I don't even know how I
Mm-hmm.
got so lucky, but I did. So I'm
Yeah.
very just appreciative of those experiences. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Melanie, so you are part of your role on the committee is that you all come up, you mentioned this like with the theme and kind of where the conference is going. Can you remind us what the theme is for this year for the 34th
Yes.
conference?
Yes, this
Yeah.
year, and again, I had to check myself in my brain a little bit because guess what? We're already planning 2025. So that's the blessing and the curse of the conference committee is you get to be behind the scenes, but we actually plan these about 18 months in advance. So right now
Yeah.
we're in this interesting, exciting, but like big time where we're already kind of thinking about and conceiving 2025 as we're getting ready to launch 2024. So this year's is the new normal,
Yes.
harnessing wisdom and experience. Oh no, pop quiz, I failed the pop quiz. Those words are all in there though, but the new normal. But really what we were trying to speak to, which is an idea of just recognizing, one, we all know what happened 4 years ago, and the way in which not only our personal lives and have had been upended and changed, but we know that the field of eating disorders has changed significantly. We know the field of doing therapy and being helping professionals out in the world, regardless of whether you're a therapist, a dietitian, a physician, a coach, right? Like the landscape has changed. And
Yeah.
so really just addressing that continuing to change landscape that all of us are still trying to kind of get our bearings in, because I think there have been a lot of like innovations and new things that are really exciting, and really encouraging and hopeful and creates new opportunities. But there's also some things that we're kind of like struggling with or holding on to, and we need to hold on to because we don't want to lose, some of the wisdom and like history, of all of the things that have gone before. So really kind of sitting in that tension that we're all in. And that's what this year's conference is about. The new normal is about. Yeah.
So I have the title
Oh, good.
just so we get it right. The new normal, harnessing wisdom and
Mhm.
innovation, which is exactly what you just said.
Yes.
Okay. Well, and it's so funny because again, Sam knows this, but earlier today we were again in our meeting planning for 2025, and we will sit there and workshop like these words and these ideas like wisdom, innovation, new norm. And so we just did that a few hours ago for next year. So I was like, is my brain going to be able to separate the two?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it just goes to
But it's,
show how
yeah.
much time, thought, and
Oh,
effort goes into the planning of every conference. What did you say? It's
Mhm.
like an 18-month process.
it is.
Mhm.
I mean, this isn't
It is.
something that's just like thrown together. This is something
No.
where all these minds on the committee come together
Mhm.
and thoughtfully and mindfully plan out what we think the
Yeah.
eating disorder field, where, what we want to learn, what we want to know,
Right.
how we need to grow, all of
Right.
these different themes. And it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something I've been really grateful for. So, Melanie, you said what, 10 years? I think I've
Mhm.
attended 5, maybe.
Mhm.
And just seeing and hearing from, I think one of the things that has been so lovely to me about this conference, working within the eating disorder community, is acknowledging like maybe where we've come from and some of the history of eating disorder treatment.
Mhm.
And like you said, how we're moving forward, what those
Yeah.
innovations are and how we can do that. So that makes me really excited. I'm with you with the nerds of the continuing education. I love learning all that I can.
Yeah.
And speaking of, we have 56 CE credits potentially available
Yeah.
to the
So
to the
many.
yeah.
So many CE applications to fill out. I might have something to do with that. So I know how much work again goes into that. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Just
Mhm.
anyone out there that's listening who's ever done one. Imagine doing that many.
Oh
So again,
my gosh.
it's a massive undertaking. Totally worth it.
Yeah,
Totally worth it though, because it's so, I guess again, gratifying to learn from people that like you've read their book or
right.
you've read their
Yeah.
and again, that's part of how we craft this is that, we pay to like what books are we reading? What podcasts are we listening to? And I get so much inspiration from podcasts because I am such a ravenous podcast consumer, getting ideas of different, what are we seeing on social media? What are folks talking about in therapist or dietitian or
Yeah.
eating disorder, like, groups on various social media platforms? What are the issues that they're contending with? And really thinking about how do we, again, um, one, like, get connected with the people who are really doing this work and talking about it or really, again, innovating,
Mhm.
and how do we bring them all together? So we were particularly proud and excited of this year as far as one, just the robustness, like how many CEs we can offer,
Yeah.
um, so that there really is not only something for everybody, but like lots of some things for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not, I think that can be hard too when you're trying to decide, like, do I go to this conference or that conference? And I told you, I'm a conference junkie all around. Like, obviously, my heart and soul goes into this conference because it's a big part of my job into putting it on. And I love it. But I love going to other conferences and even non-eating disorder conferences. And I've, attended several recently. But again, I really can't. Um, Words are hard for me to describe how like excited the nerd in me gets when I'm sitting in a room or again sitting on a Zoom with someone that I've read their work for years, and now I'm hearing them talk about it and they're talking to me, or it feels like they're talking to me, or I even have an
Yeah.
opportunity for them to talk to me because I can ask a question in a chat if I'm virtual, or I can sit there and raise my hand in the room. And again, I have like core memories of like raising my hand in a room, being so anxious to do it because I was so afraid that I was going to ask a stupid question.
Yeah.
And the person that I looked up to, this is actually a particular memory, Kelly Klump, anyone who's familiar with Kelly Klump,
Mhm.
an incredibly prolific and brilliant researcher from Michigan State who's done a ton of work in eating disorders. This was years ago, pre-COVID, I don't know exactly which year, and it was in a workshop at the Renfrew conference. And again, I thought about my question for like 30 minutes before because I wanted to make sure it was adequate.
Mhm.
And I don't even know what the answer was to my question, but I got brave enough. I asked the question, and Kelly said, "Oh, that's such a good and insightful question." And let me tell you, I have
Oh,
held on to that for
yes. You've
5+
internalized
years
it.
because I was like, Kelly
Mhm.
Clark thought I had a good and insightful question. But again, that piece of little connection, like meant something to me, and
Yeah.
also encouraged me to learn more about it and be more interested and excited. So it's just interesting to see and feel how much that like excitement from a conference really can give you momentum to kind of keep, like, as a clinician, like keep going, keep learning,
Yeah.
keep growing. Like it's where I get energized.
Yeah.
This
So
is why I think it's so important for new clinicians
oh,
to come to the conference.
mhm.
You know, those little moments where you
Yeah.
can, meet these, well-known figures in the eating
Yeah.
disorder field. But not only that, like you get to ask questions and it builds your confidence.
Mhm.
And I think we even have a networking event this year for
Yeah,
new
for new,
clinicians.
and that was actually part of the idea. We have it's for early career. I think we called it early career
Yeah.
professionals because people enter the field at many different stages, and we certainly know a lot of folks might enter into the eating disorder world as a second career. But really an opportunity, one, to just talk about like the shared developmental experiences you have being early
Mhm.
career, which include things like imposter syndrome.
Oh,
But
yeah.
then also, again, to energize, to motivate, to encourage and say, yeah, I'm new too, but you know what? Going and asking the question in the chat actually might yield something good. It might create a connection that you didn't have before, and really, encouraging each other to do that. And as I'm thinking about it too, like, I mentioned I've been with Renfrew for almost 17 years, but I've only been to 10 conferences. Well, that's because back in the olden days, no conference was virtual, right? There was no hybrid component,
Right.
or so people still have to be seeing the patients. So for that's why in the early years I wasn't able to attend, because there was no such thing as a virtual or a hybrid conference where you could virtually access the content,
Right.
which is such a cool thing now that that's not even a factor as much anymore. Is that, can you physically be there or make the time? That really wasn't earlier in my career. That wasn't an opportunity. So the way
Right.
that it opens it up to so many other people, for geographic location and just
Yeah.
time, like you don't have to watch it in that second in order
Yeah.
to be able to get the information. So that flexibility I think is really nice, and just again wasn't there a few years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
And great for people also. I think there's more of an appreciation these days for people who just have more energy late at night and they
Yeah.
just, learn and
Mhm.
they're more productive at night. And you can
Mhm.
watch a workshop at midnight if you
Mhm.
want
Yeah.
to, if that
Oh,
works
and I
for you.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In your
I have.
PJs, you just watch it. I,
Mhm.
Melanie, I was hoping we could talk about the keynote speakers, like a sneak
Okay.
peek.
Yeah.
And could
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit about our lineup? What do we need to
Yeah.
know about these
I'm
folks?
so excited about our lineup that I'm going to share in no particular order because they all dazzle me. And again, every year I'm like, again, like, how did we get this lucky? Or how did I get this lucky that we were able to pull together this group? So our, but I guess I'm trying to think of the order in which they fall. So the first keynote that happens live, because the keynotes do happen live. So those will be live streamed. We got a dynamic duo. We've got Dr. Sabrina Strings, who, if you're not familiar, wrote the book Fearing the Black Body,
Yeah.
which is actually sitting. Oh, I did not queue this up, but it just happens to sit on my desk. But
There it is. I have
the
it too. It's
racial
on my
origins
shelf.
of fat phobia. But seriously, but
Mhm.
this is how we again decide our program. I'm like, what books am I reading? What are the books on my bookshelf? Who are the people that I've read and I would love to hear from? So we've got Sabrina, who's really going to be talking about, again, the origins of, really actually colonialism, and the way that
Yeah.
really informed not only our ideals about health and wellness and who is or isn't healthy or who accessible to that, but again, methods of control of Black, brown, and indigenous people that have very much have very direct relationships to weight stigma in today, right? So really looking at those historical origins. And then we've got Dr. Chucks. So Dr. Chucks is a physician from the UK, who, again, this year I didn't know about him, say like a year and a half ago, and then all of a sudden I started seeing, like, on my Instagram and LinkedIn, about this book that he had edited and brought together all of these voices of lived experience. The book's called Eating, also sitting right here, didn't totally didn't plan this, but these are just where my books are. Eating Disorders Don't Discriminate, Stories of Illness, Hope, and Recovery from Diverse Voices. And really looking at and recognizing, again, a long-standing issue within our field of really tending to have historically only platform certain voices, which tend to be the stereotypical white, thin, affluent, young voices. And this book really, chapter by chapter, is a story of lived experience from people from all over the world, from all different racial and ethnic groups, from different religious backgrounds, from different ages. I mean, just really gives you such a rich, examination of all the different types of ways that folks might experience eating disorders that really don't get a lot of playtime.
Yeah.
So again, like creating that through line, though, of looking at those kind of historical origins that Dr. Strings researches and so beautifully and eloquently writes about, which what I'll also say as a fun like teaser for everybody is she writes a beautiful, eloquent academic work, but she's like a lovely, funny, down-to-earth person to talk to and listen to as well, which I think is really nice when you get to see these folks like come out from behind the podium, if you will, and let their personality shine. And she's just a lovely human being, and really fun to listen to, even though she gets into the history. And then Dr. Chucks, again, is really talking about the way that this shows up in his emergency room, because he's worked as a physician in the UK and the national healthcare system, and all the ways in which folks enter into healthcare that, again, have historically not even been recognized or even been considered as to folks that could possibly be suffering from eating disorders, and really looking at amplifying those voices.
Yes. And I'm really excited to read that book. I haven't read it yet. I heard about it. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe there's a chapter where Megan Jane Crabb tells her story.
Yeah.
And we had Megan on our
Really?
podcast.
Yes.
And I was so thrilled to see that
Yes.
there was a chapter devoted to her story. So she
That's
wrote Body Positive
incredible.
Power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really cool.
Yeah. So if those of you out here are hearing about that book for the first time, because it's newer, it just came out in the past year, definitely want to recommend you check that out. At wherever books are sold, but including your local independent bookseller, because we like to support them too.
Yes.
Yes. So that's the first, in the order of time of when they get live streamed. That's our first keynote. And our Chief Clinical Officer, Dr. Gail Brooks, is going to be moderating that and having kind of so each of them will kind of share, certainly from their areas of expertise and wisdom, and then have kind of a discussion with them, and really bringing it all together, which I think will be really great. And then the next keynote I will be moderating will be with Virginia Soul Smith. So those of you who are, again, podcast hardcore podcast consumers like me might be familiar with her podcast, Burnt Toast. I've listened to it for years. I'm such a nerd. I'm a Patreon, like I pay to listen to podcasts. Yes, podcasts are free, but sometimes some of that really good content is totally worth paying, by the way. And she didn't ask me to say that. I'm just telling you that. So I'm really excited to get to moderate her keynote, one, because I've been a fan for a long time. So those of you that don't know Virginia or her podcast, she's a journalist by trade, but also a woman who has lived in a body that has changed sizes over time, which a lot of people know that experience. And that part of her work as a journalist was, kind of covering typical women's things that are talked about in media, like travel and fashion and, parenting and things like that, but not necessarily from a perspective that felt very authentic or genuine to her, in which her writing has evolved over time. And her book that she released last year, which I also have and would highly recommend. And in my therapy private practice, I almost universally recommend this book, especially even when I'm working with adults, actually, to have their parents read it. It's called Fat Talk: Parenting in the Age of Diet Culture. And when I tell you that she hits home on some of the key issues that we certainly see as clinicians, as far as like when we think about like what are the, experiences that might have contributed to the way that this person that's sitting in front of me, the way that they see the world and the way that they see themselves in relationships to the world, the beliefs that they have about their weight, shape, and size, and where does that come from? Just does and you can see her like investigative journalist chops in this book, because she really lays it out. Each chapter has a very explicit theme that's really, again, you can feel it like come off the page, but it's all what I really admire, so well researched and resourced.
Yeah.
That this isn't just like a big opinion piece. I mean, and she does include her own perspective and opinion based on her lived experiences, and she's very clear to share that, and be very clear, but like she really does an amazing job as a journalist being able to like decode research speak, and a lot of journalists don't do a great job with that, right? Like we see a lot of headlines that are very like buzzy and like catch people's attention, but can actually be very misleading about what the data says. And certainly information about weight and health is very, very much like a thing that happens with in the popular media. And that she really has pushed back on that, and really does a beautiful job of articulating the science in a way that us non-scientists can understand, and that parents in particular can understand. So like I've recommended it to the parents of children and adolescents that I've worked with, but also to people who are, full grown adults and are still trying to untangle from some of these beliefs that were passed down by well-intentioned, loving parents, and be able to make some meaning. So one, to have them read it as an assignment for themselves to get some better understanding of maybe all of the diet culture soup their parents were swimming in that might have informed that, but also to have as a pretty healing opportunity to have their parents read it. Their parents kind of understand the way that this has impacted them in a way that might be very different. So I can't say enough about that resource. So I am, can you hear, jazzed
Yeah.
to sit and meet with her, and talk about again, some pretty practical things to be thinking about. Like, so this is the diet culture soup we've all lived in. Now what? Right? How do we talk to our children of all ages about some of these issues in a way that is supportive and nurturing, and provides them with what they need, and does not, and of course, first and foremost, does not add to or create more harm in those areas. So I'm particularly jazzed and feel very lucky that I get to do that. And keynote number 3, I don't know, I'm going to put you on the spot, Sam, since you're going to be moderating keynote number 3. Do you want to talk a little bit about keynote number 3? And again, not number 3 in order of importance, but just the way that it falls in the recording schedule.
Sure.
Christy,
Yes.
Christy
So
Harrison.
so Christy Harrison, you may know her book. I mean, if you're in the eating disorder field, Anti-Diet. I mean, along with Fearing the Black Body, I would say Anti-Diet is one of the most recommended books.
Absolutely.
When I watch a presentation, it's almost always included as something you have to read. So so Anti-Diet, and The Wellness Trap is one of her newer books. And she appears on podcasts. She is a prolific writer as well, and really helps unpack all of the things we really need to unlearn about dieting, wellness culture, which I think many of us can get easily sucked into. And what she talks about specifically is the fact that many of us can agree that the medical system is not always what we want or need it to be. And there are companies that take advantage of that. And so they try to insert themselves and sell their products and make you think that there's a cure for X, Y, and Z, or, that something can prevent X, Y, and Z. And it can be very easy to get sucked into that. But just like our other keynotes, everything she writes about is backed by research. And of course, she has lived experience. She's very open about, she talks a lot about how she got sucked into disordered eating and how that impacted her life. So there is some of that, just sort of very similar to Virginia Soul Smith. But everything that she talks about, there's the research there. So it's solid. And I'm really excited to moderate her workshop. She's one of our keynotes.
Yeah.
I'm just excited to meet her. And I have lots of questions that, when you're reading these books, you never really think, oh my gosh, I'm going to
Yeah.
actually have a chance to
Yeah.
talk to this person. So I'm really excited to be able to meet her and talk with her. Yeah.
I'm excited to watch you do that. Well, and that, one of the things that she, as far as what I anticipate is going to be a takeaway from your time with her, like, as she shares what she's going to, what she prepared to share, and then you guys have like the Q&A. And by the way, I mean, we're going to have opportunities for everyone to participate in Q&A. You can enter, your questions into the chat. So again, I know it's not the same as sitting in the room with people, but still, like, your question could be asked. And
Yeah.
I always have questions for the people that I'm reading their books or listening to their podcasts. And again, I mean, Christy's podcasts are like, so, I mean, one, she's made so many, so prolific that
Yes.
so many people have listened to them. I would imagine people will be very itching to ask her lots of different questions. But, I anticipate that we're going to walk away with, and from reading the book, from reading both of her books, the Anti-Diet and the Wellness Trap, some like tangible strategies for being able to like make heads or tails of some of the information or misinformation or disinformation that we come out
Yeah.
that is out there constantly,
Yeah.
coming at us in our social media feeds, in our email inboxes now, because now you get an email from any website you've ever visited, any store you've ever been to, any podcast you've ever listened to. Like, the amount of information that's just coming at us all the time is so much, it's hard to know what to do with. But I think she does a really great job of giving you some, again, actual tools that you can apply in the moment to, like,
Yeah.
is this information that I want to integrate? Is this information that feels accurate, true, evidence-based, as it says who, right? Like, evidence-based according to who? Where does this information come from? What does it mean to me? How might it help me? How might it not help me? How might it harm me? Is this information that's even helpful for me to be consuming right now because of what I might be struggling with? So I really think I really think each of our keynotes are going to be very, like, tangibly useful to people, in addition to the just how cool and exciting it is to listen to people that you've read their books and listen to their podcasts and stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And to me, it's you get both.
I'm a big believer that media literacy should be a component of all eating disorder treatment. And she does a beautiful job of showing you how to do that. So that is one wonderful thing about her talk that I'm excited for. So, yeah.
Melanie, so you are also speaking at the conference. Yeah.
I am. Yes. I'm co-presenting with Angela Kalutis, who is a colleague of mine that I've worked with for a long time, and I adore working with and presenting with. So our presentation is looking at presentations of co-occurring eating disorders and OCD, because as most of us are probably familiar, there's can be pretty significant co-occurrence or overlap, right? So and that there's a lot of shared underlying, what we'd say, mechanisms, right? Like things that might activate or exacerbate strong emotions, particularly strong and heightened anxiety, are shared amongst, individuals with eating disorders and OCD. So it's not uncommon that we see both. So we'll be talking quite a bit about OCD and about those when we see both at the same time, and looking at treatment very specifically. Because I love hearing theory. Theory is so important and so necessary in order to being grounded and understanding the problem. So we will definitely start with that. But what I'm looking for when I go to a workshop, therefore I try, fingers crossed, to deliver it when I give a workshop is, but what do I do with this?
Right.
So really talking about, treatment approaches and interventions that have a strong evidence base, both for eating disorder symptoms that you might see, like the combination of symptoms that you might see in an eating disorder, as well as OCD, and that looking, again, that a lot of times you can't even really tease out the difference, and maybe it's not that important to tease out the difference. That might be a statement that I might make in the training.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. I have a question for you, Melanie. You've been to 10 conferences. We're talking hundreds of hours of CEs.
Yeah.
Can you?
I never have to worry about it when my renewal's up, which is great.
I
It's
know.
a great perk.
It is.
I'm never short on them.
It's a great perk. Do you have a memory of just one thing that stuck with you, something
Oh,
that
yeah.
moved you or changed your approach as a
Oh,
clinician or a researcher?
oh no, where to begin?
Of all the
So many.
10. Right.
So many. Yeah, I can think of one. Well, it's one that's same presenter, multiple conferences, but left me with a certain feeling
Yeah.
and some knowledge and information that I do think has changed the way that I conceptualize and the way that I interact with folks that I treat. So,
Really?
yeah, I know, right?
I'm on the edge of my seat. Who
I
is
know,
this?
right? Well, Sam, you were involved. You were
Okay.
you were moderator one of the times. So Dr. Adele LaFrance
Yeah.
has
Oh,
has
yes.
has spoken at our conferences several times.
Mhm.
I think at least three that I can remember.
I think you're right. Yes.
Two keynotes. So going backwards um, to the first time, and I think that when I saw her at the Renfrew conference the first time, which was quite a few years ago, as a keynote, there was something really important that stuck with me ever since then, because I love doing therapy. I love working with eating disorders. I don't love doing family work. I recognize how important it is, how critically important it is,
Yeah.
and again, it gets my anxiety going. It's harder because it's more dynamics to navigate. You know, and that as a clinician, I just think it's so important, but it's complicated, it's hard. And so as someone who had avoided a lot of you know, family work previously, one, and that's her, you know, her for those of you who are not familiar, she developed or co-developed EFFT, emotion focused family therapy. So I remember actually going into her keynote being like, I'm here, I'm gonna hear it, but like I don't, family therapy is not my like number one thing, so I'm like only moderately interested. And then walking away, not only being interested, but there was a particular statement that she said when she was talking about um, parents or caregivers and their loved ones at any age, whether we're talking about children, adolescents, or full-grown adults.
Yeah.
Because someone in the audience, I think, had asked, like, are there any family dynamics or circumstances in which you would not involve the parents in treatment? Because I think a lot of times it's very easy for us as clinicians to really, even if we're not intentionally doing it, blame parents or kind of, you know, really maybe over attribute someone's struggle to their family of origin, which doesn't mean that there haven't been any influences there, but that what she was talking about is that, you know, she has to come to, as a clinician, come to have a starting place of believing, like deeply believing that this parent, despite whatever may have happened, despite whatever circumstance they're in, and I think she even gave the example, like they could be in prison for some sort of terrible crime, that even those folks, that I need to have a starting place as a clinician of believing that that parent loves that child, that caregiver loves that child, and that that's the foundation and that that's the basis, regardless of all the other stuff. And we have to contend with the other stuff, but that we can't just wholesale cut out or, you know, parents, or just, you know, think of them as a non-issue or as an unworkable issue. But that she's willing to do the brave and hard thing and move towards working with families that have had severe fractures, severe ruptures, severe dysfunction, and you know, and she was sharing about those experiences, which I just found very powerful and really has shifted the way that I think about interacting and talk, even just talking in individual therapy with adults about their relationships with their parents, and needing to have that starting pace of most parents are actually just trying to do their best. They may not have done their best. They may have made many mistakes. But it's not because they inherently do not love or do not have the capacity to love and care about their children. And that has to be our starting place, so that I, as a clinician, don't start with judgment and don't start with shame, because that never really gets us anywhere in my conceptualization or in my ability to interact with this client and or their family. So that was like introduction one. And then I've seen her speak many times since then, because then I became wanting to know more, because I got energized and interested and was like, maybe this is for me. Maybe I do need to know more about this, and have since learned a lot about her work in EFFT. But then this past year, when you moderated her keynote, Sam, in person at the Renfrew conference, I couldn't even tell you what it was that she said at the end, but when the keynote ended, I was snot crying.
Yes.
Which I don't know if that, I mean, I don't want to give everyone that visual, but like I could not, and I'm a tend to try to overly control my emotions in public settings, and I know that that's not always the best, but still, I was wearing my grown-up suit and everything, so I wanted to look like I was a grown-up and professional, and I was boo-hooing, and I had like a visceral, emotional response to what she shared. And she, again, was talking about mothers and talking about actually reconciling, I believe, with her own mother or grandmother.
Her grandmother. Yeah, she had a vision of her grandmother.
A vision, yes.
Oh,
but
gosh,
when I tell you, like, I actually like got like chills, goosebumps, whatever, even just the memory, like recalling the memory of it and how impactful it was. So that's also nice, like in that following someone's like not only career and her work and what she's put out into the world, but like continuing to learn and grow, even though we're kind of talking about some of the topics were similar. So I'm not like, it just, that I will remember those experiences, and I'll remember how they made me feel first, which I think is why the memory stays with me. And then I also remember what I learned that I think is important to kind of bring forward. So I was not prepared for that question, but so that was my totally off the cuff.
Good answer. And I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Yeah. It was, her talk was so lovely last year.
But yeah, it's not, I mean, many a Kleenex, many, like I needed to like compose myself after.
I feel like
again, in the best way. It was good emotional.
It was good.
Really, really.
I feel like important. I looked around and saw that from many people last year.
And I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
I didn't like, I didn't go into that expecting that, but boy, did I walk out like really moved, deeply moved.
Right.
Deeply
well,
moved.
you know, I was a moderator for that talk, but I also had to introduce her, and I tried to warn all of you. I was up there and I said, look, I was in a training with Adele, and I don't think, I think I cried more in those 3 days than I had in like the entire year. And so I warned you guys. And then at the end, everyone was crying, and I went up there teary-eyed and I said, I told you. So don't blame me. Yeah.
You did.
But it was good. It was, I mean, yeah, she has a way of just making you feel the deepest emotions. And you're so grateful for her, you know, for her ability that, you know, that you can even get in touch with yourself that deeply.
And again, I didn't plan, like I was like, I'm in business mode today, right?
Oh,
like I was not, I didn't go there for that, but that's what I got.
Oh, I know.
So it was great. It's great.
Melanie, so I think we're coming to the end of our conversation, which is crazy to me. I feel like we have so many more questions to ask you, but could you share with us how we can get involved in the conference? What do we do? How do we access it? Yeah. Where do we go?
Sure. The easiest way, I think, is to go directly to the conference website. So it's easy to remember, renfrewconference.com. It's its own website. I mean, if you go to the regular renfrewcenter.com website, you can find it. There's links there, but you have to click like 2 more extra buttons. So why not go directly to the source? I find the user interface pretty easy to go ahead and register. And what I really like is that you can see everything, you know, before you even register. You can see all the, so I mean, we talked obviously about the keynotes today, but we didn't even get to talk about the rest of the 56 CEDs. I mean, there are so many workshops of so many, just a large variety of the different types of topics, different types of speakers. You know, we make sure that we have, you know, a decent amount of workshops that are going to speak directly to registered dietitians, which again are open to everybody, but, you know, speak certainly to issues that relate, you know, things that speak directly to medical, you know, professionals and provider who are more in the, you know, so you can see the whole kit and caboodle before you even register. And the registration is actually very user friendly because again, I struggle with executive functioning at times, and if the registration isn't easy, I may never do it. So the good news is we have made sure and tested it many times that it's actually very very easy to go ahead and get registered quickly without.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Melanie, thank you so much for being here with us today. This was a great conversation as usual. I think this is your third time on our podcast.
It is.
Yes, three times a
You're gonna
charm.
Well,
get the
I
award.
appreciate that you asked me to come talk about things that I like talking about. That helps.
Of
That
course,
makes it
yes.
fun. That
Yes,
makes
it
it fun. And
does.
this is probably, again, from the nerd part of me, like one of my favorite things to do and to talk about, because I am a hardcore conference junkie. Can't help it.
Well, we love that about you. And thank you to our audience for listening today. We hope to see you again, maybe at another episode, but maybe at the Renfrew Conference. Bye for
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.